The Omega Protocol – A Race Against Time. Chapter 1. The Omega Threat. The sky was dark and ominous. The distant rumble of thunder and the flashes of lightning gave the impression that something was coming, something big. Mary looked up at the sky and felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that the storm was a harbinger of something sinister, and that she needed to prepare for the worst. Mary was a scientist, working for the Omega Corporation, a research and development institution that specialized in advanced technology. She was part of a team that was working on the most important project in the history of the company, the creation of a new energy source that could revolutionize the world. They called it the Omega Power. As she walked to her lab, Mary felt a sense of unease. She had heard rumors that the project was in trouble, that something had gone wrong with the experiments. She tried to push the thoughts out of her mind and concentrate on her work. When she arrived at the lab, Mary found it in chaos. The machines were beeping and whirring, and the screens were flashing with errors. Her colleagues were frantically trying to get things under control, but it was clear that they were fighting a losing battle. "What's going on?" Mary asked one of her colleagues. "It's the Omega reactor," he said, his voice shaking. "It's gone critical. If we can't shut it down, it's going to explode." Mary felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. They had built the reactor deep underground, precisely to avoid such a catastrophe. If it exploded, it could cause a chain reaction that would destroy the entire facility, and the surrounding area. "We have to evacuate," Mary said, her voice trembling. "We have to get out of here now." But as she turned to leave, she saw something that made her blood run cold. In the distance, she could see a group of men in suits, carrying guns. They were moving towards the lab, and it was clear that they meant business. Mary realized with horror that the Omega Corporation had been infiltrated by enemies, who were after the Omega Power. They had only one goal: to get their hands on the technology, whatever the cost. "We have to defend ourselves," Mary said, gritting her teeth. "We can't let them have it." She picked up a wrench, the first thing she could find, and charged towards the intruders, her heart pounding in her chest. The fight had just begun. Chapter 2. The Gathering. Mary swung the wrench with all her might, hitting one of the men in the face. He stumbled back, clutching his bleeding nose, and Mary took advantage of the moment to kick him in the stomach. But she was outnumbered. The other men quickly closed in, their guns pointed at her. Mary grappled with one of them, trying to wrestle the weapon out of his hand. But he was too strong, and soon she found herself disarmed. It was then that a voice rang out, calm and authoritative, cutting through the chaos. "Put down your weapons, now." Mary turned and saw a man in a well-tailored suit, holding a briefcase. He looked like a corporate executive, but his piercing gaze and the way he held himself made her shiver. "We're not here to harm anyone," he said, in a voice that brooked no argument. "We're here to gather the Omega Power. You can either cooperate with us, or suffer the consequences." Mary felt a surge of anger. How could they be so callous, so ruthless? The Omega Power was not something that could be just handed over to anyone. It was a powerful, volatile force that could destroy the world, if not managed properly. "We'll never give you the Omega Power," she spat, her eyes blazing. "It's too dangerous. It could destroy us all." The man in the suit smiled coldly. "We'll take the risk," he said. "We have the resources and the know-how to handle it. But you, on the other hand, do not. So, I suggest you give it up willingly." Mary was about to reply when a loud explosion shook the lab. The ground trembled, and the lights flickered. She knew that the Omega reactor was still unstable, and that they needed to act fast. "Fine," she said, through gritted teeth. "I'll take you to it. But you have to promise to help us stabilize it first." The man nodded. "Agreed. Lead the way." Together, Mary and the intruders made their way through the maze-like facility, dodging falling debris and the occasional electrical discharge. Mary knew that they were playing a dangerous game, that any mistake could lead to disaster. But she was determined to protect the Omega power, no matter the cost. Eventually, they reached the heart of the lab, where the Omega reactor was located. It was a massive, humming machine, with wires and tubes snaking in every direction. Mary could feel the energy emanating from it, a powerful, primal force that seemed to pulsate through her veins. "This is it," she said, gesturing towards the reactor. "But we need to stabilize it first, or it could—" Before she could finish her sentence, there was a blinding flash of light. The ground shook violently, and Mary was thrown off her feet. She could hear the man in the suit shouting something, but she couldn't make out the words. All she could see was darkness, and a sense of overwhelming dread. When she awoke, she was lying on the floor, surrounded by rubble. Her head was pounding, and her vision was blurry. But she could see that the Omega reactor was still there, still humming away. And she knew, with a deep certainty, that something had changed. The Omega power was no longer just an idea. It was a reality, and they had to be careful, or it could be the end of them all. Chapter 3: The Hacking Race. Mary stumbled to her feet, trying to shake off the dizziness. The man in the suit was shouting orders, trying to get his team to restart the reactor. But Mary could see that something was wrong. She could feel it in the air. "We have to shut it down," she yelled, her voice hoarse. "We can't risk another explosion." The man turned towards her, his expression cold. "We don't have time for this," he said. "We need to get the Omega power up and running. Now." Mary could feel her anger boiling over. How could he be so blind, so careless? The Omega power was not just a tool, to be used for someone's benefit. It was a fundamental force, that could change the very fabric of reality. But she had no time to argue. She knew that she needed to act fast if she wanted to salvage anything from the situation. Taking a deep breath, she charged towards the reactor, her mind racing. As she approached the controls, she could see that the intruders were already trying to hack their way into the system. They had brought with them a team of experts, who were furiously tapping at their laptops, trying to bypass the security protocols. Mary gritted her teeth. She knew that she had to beat them. She was the only one who understood the intricacies of the Omega reactor, the only one who knew how to shut it down safely. With a sense of purpose, she began to type at the keyboard, her fingers moving quickly, almost mechanically. She could see the progress bars on the screen, indicating the level of the hack. She knew that she had to get there first, that she had to stop them before it was too late. The seconds ticked by, and Mary felt herself slipping into a kind of trance, a state of pure focus. She could see the code streaming across the screen, a blur of ones and zeros. She could hear the beeping of the machines, the sound of her own heartbeat. And then, suddenly, she saw it. A line of code that didn't belong. A back door, a way in that the intruders had somehow managed to create. Mary felt a chill run down her spine. If they got through that, they could control the Omega power, manipulate it, even turn it against them. She knew that she had to close the back door, to lock them out of the system. With a trembling hand, she typed a command, and watched as the code disappeared. For a moment, she felt a sense of triumph, of relief. But then the screens went dark. Mary felt a sense of panic rising inside her. What had she done? Had she triggered an emergency shutdown? Had she bricked the reactor? She tried to reboot the system, but nothing happened. It was dead. And then, she heard the sound of applause. She turned towards the man in the suit, who was clapping his hands, a cold smile on his face. "Congratulations," he said. "You've just handed us the Omega power." Mary could feel her world crumbling around her. It had all been for nothing. The years of hard work, the sacrifices, the dreams. All gone, in an instant. But she wasn't done yet. She knew that she had to fight back, that she had to find a way to reclaim the Omega power. And she would do it, no matter the cost. Chapter 4: The military strike. Mary didn't have much time to gather her thoughts. The man in the suit and his team were already loading up the Omega power, preparing to leave the lab. She knew that she had to act fast, that she couldn't let them get away with it. But she was alone. Her colleagues were either dead or gone, and the lab was in shambles. She needed backup, someone to help her fight, to reclaim the Omega power. And then she remembered Tim. Tim was a former colleague, a brilliant engineer who had left the Omega Corporation after a falling out with the management. Mary had always admired him, even if they had never been close. She remembered that he had once recommended a nearby military base as a potential ally, in case something went wrong with the experiments. It was a risky move, but Mary didn't have any other options. With a sense of determination, she grabbed her phone and dialed Tim's number. "Mary?" His voice crackled over the line. "Is that you, Tim? We need your help," Mary said, her heart pounding. "The Omega power has been stolen. We need to get it back." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "I'm in," he said finally. "Where are you?" Mary quickly explained the situation, giving him directions to the lab. She could hear the urgency in his voice, the determination. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he said. Mary hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief. She knew that Tim was their best shot at stopping the intruders, at taking back the Omega power. All she had to do was hold out until he arrived. But it wasn't going to be easy. She could already hear the sound of approaching helicopters, and the rumble of tanks. The intruders had clearly anticipated some kind of resistance, and had called in the military. Mary felt a sense of dread. She knew that the military would not take kindly to a civilian insurgency. They would use force, and they would do so quickly. The first shots rang out soon after. Mary ducked behind a pile of debris, her heart pounding. She could see the intruders and the military engaging each other, a brutal, chaotic battle. They had brought their guns and their tanks, but the intruders had their advanced technology, their knowledge of the Omega power. Mary could feel the walls of the lab shaking, as bullets and shells tore through them. She knew that she couldn't stay there, that she needed to take the fight to the intruders, to disable their weapons and secure the Omega power. With a sense of purpose, she charged out of cover, heading towards the group of men in suits. She could see the briefcase that contained the Omega power, glinting in the sunlight. But before she could reach it, there was a blinding flash. Mary felt herself being thrown back by the force of the explosion. She could feel the heat and the pressure, the sound of shattering glass and crumbling walls. She could see the bodies, both intruders and military, flying through the air. When she regained her senses, she saw that the lab was in ruins. The Omega power was gone, probably destroyed. The intruders and the military were either dead or dying. And Tim was nowhere to be seen. Mary knew that it was over. The Omega Corporation, the Omega power, it was all gone. They had tried to harness a force that they couldn't control, and it had destroyed them. She walked out of the lab, into the daylight. She could see the smoke rising in the distance, the sound of sirens and helicopters. She felt a sense of loss, of emptiness. But she also felt a sense of hope. Maybe they hadn't succeeded in creating the Omega power, but they had learned something from the experience. They had learned to respect the forces of nature, that they couldn't bend the universe to their will. Mary walked on, into an uncertain future. But she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with courage, with determination. She was a scientist, after all, and that was what scientists did. They faced the unknown, and they learned from it. Chapter 5: The Secret Weapon. Mary walked through the deserted streets, her thoughts still reeling from the events at the lab. She felt lost, almost alone, in a world that had suddenly become unpredictable and dangerous. But she also felt a sense of determination. She had survived the Omega Corporation, the military strike, and the destruction of the Omega power. And she knew that she couldn't give up now, that she needed to find a new purpose, a new cause. As she walked, she noticed a poster that caught her attention. It was pink, with bold letters that read, "The Secret Weapon." Mary felt a sense of optimism. Maybe this was it, the new cause that she was searching for. The poster led her to an old warehouse on the edge of the city. It was dark and foreboding, with graffiti and broken windows. But Mary could sense that there was someone inside, someone who was waiting for her. With a sense of trepidation, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, but Mary could see a figure standing in the corner, watching her. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, Mary could see that the figure was a woman, wearing a black outfit and a hood. She had a stern expression, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to stare right through Mary. "Who are you?" Mary asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am Sarah," the woman replied. "And you are Mary, the scientist who worked for the Omega Corporation." Mary felt a chill run down her spine. How could this woman know her name? "Don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you," Sarah said, sensing Mary's unease. "I'm here to recruit you." Mary felt a sense of relief, mixed with curiosity. "Recruit her for what?" "For the resistance," Sarah replied, her voice low and determined. "We are a group of individuals who have seen the dangers of technology and the limitations of those who control it. We are fighting for a future where science serves the people, not the corporations." Mary felt a surge of excitement. This was it, the cause that she had been searching for. Together with these people, she could make a difference. She could make sure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, feeling a sense of urgency. "We have intel that the Omega Corporation has been developing a new kind of technology, one that can manipulate reality itself. We need you to find out what it is, and sabotage it." Mary felt a sense of dread. The thought of the Omega Corporation creating a new kind of technology, after what had happened in the lab, was almost too much to bear. But she knew that she had to do it. She was a scientist, after all, and she had a duty to protect humanity from the dangers of their own curiosity. "Count me in," she said, with a sense of determination. Sarah nodded, and led Mary to a room at the back of the warehouse. It was filled with computers and equipment, with people sitting at desks, typing and chatting. Mary could see that they were all young, driven, and passionate. They called themselves the Hacktivists, and they were fighting to take down the corporations that they saw as the root of all evil in the world. Together, Mary and the Hacktivists began to plan their mission. They gathered intel from various sources, scouted the Omega Corporation's facilities, and trained for the operation. A few weeks later, they struck. It was a daring, risky operation, involving hacking into the Omega Corporation's network and infiltrating their labs. They had to dodge guards, avoid security cameras, and evade detection. But Mary and the Hacktivists were determined. They knew that they had to succeed, that the future of humanity was at stake. After several long hours, they finally found what they were looking for. It was a device, small and unassuming, but with the power to change the world. The Omega Corporation had called it the Reality Manipulator, and Mary could sense its potential for destruction. With a sense of purpose, Mary and the Hacktivists sabotaged the device, destroying its components and scrambling its network. They left behind a message, a warning to the Omega Corporation and all those who would follow in their footsteps. Humanity had reached the limits of its power, and it was time to let nature take over. The secret weapon had struck, and Mary knew that there was still hope for the future, that science could be a force for good, not just for profit. Chapter 6. The final battle. Mary and the Hacktivists had struck a major blow against the Omega Corporation, and the Reality Manipulator had been destroyed. But they knew that it was only a matter of time before the corporation struck back. And strike back they did. The Omega Corporation launched a massive attack against the resistance, using all of their advanced technology and firepower to crush the insurgency. Mary and the hacktivists fought back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The battle raged on for days, with casualties on both sides mounting. The city shook with the sound of explosions, and the air was thick with smoke and dust. The streets were littered with the wreckage of tanks and drones, and the bodies of soldiers and civilians alike. Mary knew that the resistance could not win this battle. They were too few, too weak, too inexperienced. They needed a miracle, something that could turn the tide of the war. And then, they got it. It came in the form of a warning, from an anonymous source. The Omega Corporation was planning to unleash a devastating weapon, one that would destroy the entire city, and everyone in it. Mary and the hacktivists knew that they couldn't let that happen. They needed to find the weapon, and destroy it. With a sense of urgency, they infiltrated the Omega Corporation's main facility, despite the heavy security. They hacked into their network, and searched for any information about the weapon. And they found it. It was called the Nova Cannon, a massive piece of technology that could unleash a burst of energy so powerful that it could destroy anything in its path. The Omega Corporation had been developing it in secret, with the intention of using it as a last resort. Mary and the hacktivists knew that there was no time to waste. They had to destroy the Nova Cannon before it was too late. With a sense of purpose, they prepared to do just that. They rigged the facility with explosives, and set the timers. They hacked into the control systems, and scrambled the circuits. And then, they ran. As they made their way towards the exit, they heard the alarms going off, the sound of footsteps behind them. The guards had caught on, and were pursuing them. Mary and the hacktivists ran faster, their hearts pounding with adrenaline. They burst through the doors, and into the sunlight. And then, there was a blinding flash. The shockwave knocked them off their feet. Mary could feel the heat and pressure, the sound of the explosion. She tried to get up, but her body wouldn't move. She saw the ruins of the Omega Corporation's facility, a smoldering crater in the ground. She saw the bodies of soldiers and guards, tossed aside like rag dolls. She saw the smoke and the dust, obscuring everything. And then, she saw Tim. He was lying next to her, his body broken and mangled. Mary felt a sense of despair, of loss. Tim was her friend, her colleague, her ally. He had fought for the resistance, and like so many others, he had paid the ultimate price. But she knew that he had not died in vain. He had fought for something that he believed in, something that Mary and the hacktivists still believed in. He had fought for a future where science served the people, not the corporations. Mary lay there, in the rubble, feeling a sense of emptiness. The war was over, and the resistance had lost. The Omega Corporation had won, and the city lay in ruins. But Mary also knew that the story was not over. She knew that there were others out there, others who believed in the same cause, who would continue the fight. She knew that the dream of a better future was still alive. And she knew that she would continue to fight, too. She would fight for Tim, and for all those who had died in this war. She would fight for a future that was brighter, that was safer, that was more just. She would fight, because that was what scientists did. They fought for the truth, for the knowledge, for the betterment of humanity. Mary closed her eyes, and whispered a prayer for Tim. And then she got up, and walked out of the ruins, towards a new beginning. Chapter 7. The aftermath. The city lay in ruins, reduced to rubble and dust by the final battle between the Omega Corporation and the Resistance. Mary walked through the empty streets, her heart heavy with grief and loss. She had lost so much in this war. Her colleagues, her friends, her sense of security. And yet, she also felt a sense of resilience, of hope. Because she knew that the resistance was not dead. They had lost this battle, but they had not lost the war. The dream of a better future was still alive, still burning in the hearts of those who believed. Mary walked on, towards the ruins of the Omega Corporation's main facility. She wanted to see it with her own eyes, to see the destruction that they had wrought. And what she saw surprised her. The facility was not destroyed. It was intact, almost untouched by the war. There were guards standing outside, but they didn't seem to be hostile. Mary approached them cautiously, her hands raised in surrender. "I'm with the resistance," she said, her voice shaking. "What's going on?" The guards looked at her with suspicion, but they didn't make a move to detain her. "The Omega Corporation has been disbanded," one of them said finally. "The government has taken over, and they've sealed off the facility. We're just here to make sure that no one gets in or out." Mary felt a sense of relief, but also of uncertainty. The Omega Corporation was gone. What did that mean for the future of science, for the future of humanity? She walked past the guards, and into the facility. It was a surreal experience, to see the hallowed halls of the Omega Corporation, now empty and abandoned. She could see the labs where she had worked, the experiments that she had conducted. But she could also see something else. Something new, something hopeful. The government had sent in a team of scientists and engineers, tasked with studying the Omega Corporation's technology and creating regulations for its use. They were working on new projects that were meant to benefit society, not just a select few. Mary felt a sense of optimism. Maybe this was it, the new beginning that she had been searching for. Maybe science could be a force for good, after all. She began to work with the government, to share her knowledge and her expertise. She helped to design new technologies, to create new safeguards against abuse and corruption. And she also began to work with the families and survivors of the war. She helped to rebuild the city, to provide aid and support to those who had been affected by the conflict. Mary knew that there was still a long way to go, that there were still those who wanted to use science for their own gain. But she also knew that she had a duty to make sure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. She had fought for a better future, and against all odds, she had won. Mary smiled, for the first time in a long time. The war may have been over, but the future was just beginning.